Welcome to iTTV for Form 2 Science, where we enter into the world of nutrition. Today's lesson, classes of foods. We've all felt hungry. When you feel hungry, you have this funny sensation of like having a hole in your stomach. The reason that we are hungry is because our body is asking for nutrients. These nutrients could be because the body needs some energy, because the body needs to repair some tissue, the body needs to make some tissue. All animals, you will notice, have a body clock that is very designed around getting nutrients. One of the essential tasks of life is nutrition and the getting of nutrition. Polar bears spend almost all summer searching for food so that they have enough energy in their body to survive through winter time. Some animals will walk up to 100 kilometers in search of food. Why do animals search for food so hard and fast? Why do we need food so much? Let's go into nutrition and find out what the answers are to these questions. All living things need energy to survive. Where do we get our energy from? Food. Food provides us with the energy needed to survive. So that is really the answer we were looking for. Why does an animal walk 100 kilometers? It needs the food which is going to provide it with the energy it needs so that it can survive. Why do you have a call from your body saying, I'm hungry? Because your body needs energy in order to complete or to do the activities that you are asking your body to do. Whether it means to run around, to play hockey, to play netball, even to study, you need to have energy so that your brain can function correctly. Humans and animals cannot make their own food. We need the chemical energy in food to give us energy. What we are saying here is humans, ourselves and animals require other sources of food. Either we eat plants that can make their own food through photosynthesis, or we eat animals that eat the plants because they have the energy that came from photosynthesis. The energy in food comes from the sun. The energy change is chemical energy changes into heat energy. What we're trying to say here is that all the energy in food comes from the sun. It comes directly from the process of photosynthesis. Finally, when you've eaten the food itself contains chemical energy. This chemical energy is changed into heat energy inside your body, and that heat energy is what drives our body and gives us the power to do things. Food is needed for energy for life processes, growth and repair of worn out tissue, health maintenance, movement. These nutrients come in 7 major classes, which are, that's to say that we have 7 main classes of food that we need to know, and you must know these 7 classes. Once again, these are the kind of questions that come out in your examinations. And these are the things that you really do need to know if you want to get into a career that involves nutrition. So there are 7 classes. The 7 classes are A. Carbohydrates, B. Protein, C. Essential fats, D. Water, E. Fiber, F. Minerals, and finally, vitamins. So our essential food classes, remember them. Your carbohydrates, proteins and fats, these are the 3 most essential. Water, very important for living. Fiber, this comes from our plants. It helps to clean our digestive system. Minerals and vitamins, which we will look at in a bit more detail later, they provide us with a healthy body. These are all needed for good health. Now that we've had a look at the basics of nutrition and the 7 main food classes, let's try a few questions to test our knowledge. Question 1. What do we need food for? Remember, I said to you, animals walk 100 miles. Your own body tells you that you need food. Why? What's in this food that's so important to us? Have you written down an answer? Let's have a look. For energy. We need food for energy. Let's try another question. What is the energy change when using food? So remember, in food, food contains a particular type of energy which we call chemical energy. When you eat the food and the food is oxidized or burnt in our body, the chemical energy changes into another type of energy. Do you know what it is? Have you written these answers down? Let's check. Chemical energy to heat energy. So the energy change from food is chemical energy to heat energy. Let's try another question. What are the 7 classes of food? Now, I don't need you to remember all 7 immediately, but you must know all 7 of them because it commonly comes out in the exams. What are the 7 classes of food? Let's have a look at what the 7 classes are. Carbohydrates, proteins, essential fats, water, fiber, minerals, and vitamins. Now that we've tried a few questions, let's go and have a look at some of the main food classes, and we'll start our journey through these food classes with the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates contain carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. The main source, which means where do we get all our carbohydrates from, are rice, bread, noodles. Basically, they come from grain. Any type of grain, whether it's rice grain, wheat grain, corn grain, all these grains, okay, or seeds contain carbohydrates inside them. You will not find much carbohydrate in milk or fruits or vegetables. Like I said, they mainly come from grains. Carbohydrates provide us with energy. This is the main function of carbohydrates, to give us energy inside our body. Examples of carbohydrates are starch, which comes from plants, glycogen, which comes from animals, cellulose, which is used to make the cell wall. Now, before we move on to the next class of food, we want to go to the board and have a look at some carbohydrate and look at what the carbohydrate is really made of. Now, carbohydrates are big moleculed foods. Starch, starch, glycogen, and cellulose are what we call long chain molecules. Let me just draw a simple example up here. If we are looking at starch, which is a type of carbohydrate, starch is a long chain molecule like so. It can be up to 1,000 molecules long in a chain. It could be shorter. It really depends on where the starch comes from and how much it is being stored and things like that. Now, we can't use this long chain molecule. What we want are the single pieces inside here. If we take a piece of starch and we cut it into smaller pieces, the smaller piece is very famous, and we know what it is. It's called glucose. This is what we really want. From starch, we get glucose, and it's this glucose that provides our body with energy. So remember, starch or glycogen can be broken down into smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces represent sugar, and the main sugar is glucose, and that is what we need in our body. We can't digest cellulose very well. Animals can, but our digestive tract is not designed for cellulose, so we can't get starch from it. So remember the main examples of carbohydrates: starch, which comes from plants; glycogen from animals; cellulose, which is used to make cell walls. Now that we've had a look at carbohydrates, let's try a few questions on carbohydrates. What is the function of carbohydrates? Remember, I was saying carbohydrates provide us with glucose. What do we need the glucose for? Have you written an answer down? Let's check it. As a source of energy. So carbohydrates are needed by us as a source of energy. Let's try another question. Name 3 foods that contain carbohydrates. Remember, carbohydrates come from grains. We need to know grains. Think about them. Have you written down the answers? Let's compare. Rice, noodles, and bread. If you also wrote the word pasta down, that would also be correct. Now that we've had a look at some questions on carbohydrates, let's move on to the next food class, which is proteins. Proteins contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. The main source: fish, egg white, meat. So these are our main sources of protein. Proteins really have to come from plants, because plants are the only ones that can make the basic units of proteins. So ultimately, animals eat plants, and then other animals eat those animals, and they get the protein through a chain, as the protein moves from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Proteins are used for and to make tissue. They are also used to make hormones and enzymes. So what we're saying here is proteins have a major function in the body, in that they're used to make all our tissues, cells. If the tissues or cells are damaged in some way, like you cut yourself or something, you'll notice that your skin grows back. Well, what's happening there is the protein is being used to make new tissue in that area. Also, inside our body, we have all sorts of chemicals that are used to help our body function correctly, such as hormones and enzymes. We will look at a bit more detail in terms of enzymes at a later part of this chapter, and hormones we'll really look at when we are in Form 3. Fat contains carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Main source: butter, oil, eggs, milk. Now, fats are also known as lipids. So once in a while, if you're reading a book, they may say the word lipid instead of fat. It's just a scientific terminology for fats. Fat has 2 main functions. A, provide insulation, reduce heat loss from the body. B, source of stored energy. So please understand, fat has multiple functions. It's really there as insulation. When you're born as a baby, you already have a thin layer of fat under your skin because it reduces heat loss from our body. Remember, one of our main things that we need to do or maintain is our body temperature. Secondly, fat contains a large amount of energy, almost twice as much energy as carbohydrates. But to burn that energy means we lose insulation. So we use fat as an energy source when we really need to. Now, before we move on to some questions, let's have a look at the structure of proteins and fats in a bit more detail as well. Now, protein structure is very similar to starch structure in that it's made from a long chain. So, proteins, very similar. They're made from long chains of what we call amino acids. Once again, our body can't use these proteins. What our body wants to do is make its own protein. So when we get the protein inside our body, same as just now, we cut it like this inside our body during digestion, and we produce these smaller pieces, and these smaller pieces here are called amino acids. And there are 20 amino acids altogether. 20 types. Lysine, valine, glycine, cytosine, pyrroline, all of these are examples of amino acids. And basically what our body does is it takes all the amino acids and it puts it back together and makes a brand new protein that we need for ourselves. Fatty acids and glycerol are two parts of fat. So fat is a bit unique. Fat is a slightly weird molecule. It's got one long chain like this, and it's got three pieces connected to it like this. So what we do with the fat here is, and this is the fat, what we want to do is we want to break it here. And when we break it there, what we get are this piece, which is called glycerol, and these three pieces, which are called fatty acids. We want the fatty acids and the glycerol. So remember, this part is called the fatty acid, and this part over here, this is called glycerol. Sorry for writing on top of the arrow over there. Glycerol, G-L-Y-C-E-R-O-L. So fat is broken into those two pieces. Now that we've had a look at proteins and carbohydrates, let's try a few questions on these two types of foods. What is the function of protein? So what do we need proteins for? We've got multiple functions for it, but if you try to remember me talking about the cut earlier, what are we doing? We are repairing something. Can you remember? Have you written it down? Let's check the answer. Make tissue or repair damaged tissue. Let's try another question. What is the function of fat? So remember what the fat is being used for. Have you written down some answers? Let's compare. Provide insulation and as a source of energy. Now let's move on and have a look at a couple more of the food classes. Fiber comes from plants like vegetables or fruits. Function of fiber is to help clean the digestive tract and to help avoid constipation. Now, constipation is defined as difficulty in removing feces or waste from the body. Fiber helps to make sure that we are regular, which means that you go to the toilet regularly, not every 2 days or 3 days, which would mean that you would have constipation. Water is essential for life. All living things need water. Most food contains water. In fact, our body is almost full of water. Okay, our brain is 75% water. Our muscles are about 75% water. Believe it or not, our bones contain 22 to 25% water. Our blood is roughly 90% water. We are made up of a lot of water, and if we don't have enough water, we suffer from not having a healthy lifestyle and dehydration. Function of water. A. Help to dissolve and transport digested food, gases, and waste. B. Acts as solvent for many chemicals, meaning many of the chemicals can dissolve easily inside water. C. Required for the production of mucus. D. Supports and helps the body maintain its shape. Now, this is even more so important in what we call hydrostatic skeletons, which we will look at later in Form 2, where the whole body shape is because of the amount of fluid inside it, like worms and mollusks and starfish. E. Regulate body temperature. These are some of the functions of water. Remember, we are 75% water. So the functions of water are vast. These are, like I said, just 5 of them. If you look in your school textbook or go onto the internet, you'll find many, many more uses of water. But these are the ones that commonly come out in your examinations. So remember the 7 food classes. Remember the 5 main food classes that we looked at today: carbohydrates, proteins, fats, fiber, and water. That's all the time we have for today's lesson. Thank you for watching iTTV.